give us some information about kind of how that program works. And then like we try to do every week, talk about how you see trauma there, Lesley, and then some ways that you promote your own wellness. You and I got to talk earlier in the week about how critical that is for us. So welcome.
Absolutely.
We're happy to have you. And so I'll just let you start by telling us a little bit about who you are and what the community care clinic is and how you ended up working there.
All right, beautiful. So my name is Lesley Icenhour. I do prefer female pronouns. I'm currently the part-time psychotherapist with Community Care Clinic here in Boone. I am a provisionally licensed clinical social worker as well as a licensed clinical addiction specialist associate. I am from originally Lafayette, Louisiana, and I moved to Boone in 2010 with my husband to pursue my master's at ASU. And I never left, like so many of us. In terms of my professional experience here in the high country, I've worked with both Oasis for approximately 7 years, I want to say, and then Daymark. And I came to my social work practice through my own experiences of trauma and the transformational personal work that I've been able to do with therapists and supporters along the way, and just knowing that I wanted to provide that same level of care and honesty and support that I was given, because again, it was truly transformational. It's such important work what we do, you know. So yeah, I have a husband who is also a psychotherapist. So, and I have 2 children. Yeah. And we're just doing it. So in terms of the community care clinic, just some general information. We are a free clinic for folks who don't have health insurance. We service approximately 900 patients per year. That's a rolling average. Yeah.
That's how many students we have at Hardin Park School. So I can conceptualize that very quickly, and that is an enormous number.
It is an enormous number. And, you know, while I don't interact with the majority of our patients, you know, our care providers do. So that's an enormous, you know, caseload for our nurses and, you know, and other medical professionals to manage. But somehow they get it done and they do it well. You know, so in addition to primary care services, we also offer specialty services, including gynecology services, neurology, and mental health. We are 501c3, so we are completely nonprofit and rely solely on grants and donations. We're located in the Valley of Hope here in Boone, which is kind of the little road off of Bamboo that includes both Hunger and Health Coalition as well as Hospitality House. And we are not formally parts of those organizations. Of course, we collaborate a lot. We serve a lot of the same folks, but we are a separate entity. And I do have some information about an upcoming fundraiser, just to emphasize the fact that we do rely a great deal on community donations. We have, and I'm going to divert my eyes so I can read what was sent to me, the Fall Into Giving online auction. And we're going to be having that October 18th through the 31st. So you have quite a bit of time to participate. It will be featuring artists like Julia Ralston. We'll have signed limited edition prints of Bob Timberlake's work. We'll have some work by Lori Starkey. We will, from Lori, we'll have some handmade bowls, some quilts, much more. In the preview week will be October 11th through 17th, and all of the information can be found at 32auctions.com/fall into giving. And I can go ahead and email that blurb to Denise for anyone who does want to participate or look at some of the pieces that we're auctioning. And that way you can have it in writing, so you don't have to commit it to memory or anything.
And I'd be happy to send that out. We've got a big WCCI email list. So if you'll send that to me, I'm happy to send it on.
I'd love it. I would absolutely love it. Yeah, so I believe the next section was trauma and other interventions to build wellness that we...
Yeah, so like it's interesting for all of us to know how, because I think there's some commonalities with how we see trauma in people, and also obviously some differences. So kind of what y'all see there as far as trauma goes, and and just some details about that.
100%. Yeah. For the most part, and I'll speak about my own experience, only because I've been with Community Care Clinic for a relatively short period of time. I've been with them since May. And so I've been working remotely the entire time. So interaction with more medical clients or folks who are not participating in mental health services has been virtually none. So the people who I work with who come to psychotherapy with a trauma history, I would say probably 80% of them actually come with what I would identify as complex PTSD, or developmental trauma, which is consistent traumatic experiences of abuse and neglect across a lifetime. It's not, for the most part, it is not people coming to psychotherapy to work specifically on a recent trauma that, has just occurred. Yeah, for the most part, we discuss what that person has experienced across a lifespan, and we draw comparisons between relationships with parents, relationships with employers, relationships with partners. How has that assisted in your self-definition, and is there something we need to look at there? So in some ways, the trauma work that I do with people is very existential and person-centered in that way. And I always try to operate within a trauma framework, because that was the beginning of my professional experience. So it's kind of my default.
So 2 things I want to ask you about already. One is, I think you may be the first person we've had who did not already have relationships before COVID hit.
Right.
So you've had to develop all of your relationships strictly by telemed. And so for anybody that's had to do medical care therapy over telemed, it's definitely very different. So give us your top advice on how to establish a relationship with somebody over a screen.
Yes. Well, and it's interesting that you say that, Denise, because the majority of my patients or clients do not have access to either internet or availability of a phone that allows them to participate in video services. There's a lot of connectivity issues, as we all know, in the high country. So most of the people who I talk to on a weekly basis, I speak with over the phone. And it is different than providing in-person services, because I find that as I've gotten used to it, I have found that I want to give them a lot more feedback on, what I'm thinking or feeling about something that was just said, so it kind of brings it to me to say, an example could be, oh, wow, that is so exciting. Whereas if I was sitting in front of someone, I could give them body language that would communicate to them, wow, I could just, so I have to use my words a lot more intentionally, and be aware that someone is relying strictly on my word choice and my tone, and I don't have the most sing-songy, soothing, babbling brook voice. I can sound kind of, direct, and maybe for some folks, it's just very, I would call it direct, but
yeah.
Sure.
I've gotten comments about my voice as well. I've heard it described as sharp. Yes, and piercing. So
no, that's not my experience at all.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. But I constantly am trying, especially now, trying to assess how my voice is coming across. My 16-year-old's the favorite one that likes to talk to me about the sharpness of my voice. The other thing that you said that I thought was interesting, you were talking about how people's trauma play out in different areas, and you mentioned business, because we have a connection already, but are trying to strengthen our connection to businesses because of how significantly trauma impacts work performance, work attendance, work stability, long-term, ability to stay long-term in a job. So I thought that was interesting you bring that up. So that's your experience as well.
Those would be very valuable opportunities for education and collaboration, because I want to say that, if we combined trauma, chronic mental health issues, even acute mental health occurrences, and stress, if you balled all that up and, and looked up, probably on the Bureau of Labor Statistics or something, what are the most common reasons that people are missing work or are unable to work, they would be within that combined category, I would imagine, So I think it's absolutely vital for employers to understand the impacts of, let's just use like the mental health umbrella, and how it affects employees personally, professionally, because it is impacting business. Absolutely.
We did a little bit of research when we we're doing a business presentation about how being trauma informed reduces employee turnover and amount of money spending on training. So we talk about those different areas where trauma impacts us. So it's great to hear that therapists and other helping professionals are operating from that same place.
Yeah. I mean, and I agree with you. And still, there are, many entities, and ironically so, many social service organizations and, healthcare organizations that, in my opinion, don't understand enough and don't incorporate enough data and information into their personnel policies and, and benefit packages and things like that.
We talked to Jenna a little bit last week about her clients being at the hospitality house and being voluntary, and how powerful she feels like that work is. And so I'm imagining with 950 clients a year, that you probably, and you're part-time, is that right?
I am.
Part-time, wow.
Yes.
And so obviously it's a voluntary service that people request that they want, and then you're meeting with them fairly regularly. And you said at the beginning they don't have to have insurance.
Exactly. We only serve folks who do not have insurance.
Okay.
Yes.
And so another thing that it's been interesting for me to hear is I know how intense just traditional therapy can be. And so I always ask, do you find that working with people from a more highly concentrated trauma, a population that's more traumatized, I'm assuming that that's more intense, or how do you find that to be?
I honestly don't believe I can even say, because I would say almost the entirety of my professional work, including the work that I did in Louisiana before I moved here, I worked in a psychiatric inpatient unit for people who did not have insurance. So the majority of the work that I've done with people, they have had a lot of the same barriers, a lot of the same demographic features, in terms of healthcare availability, income availability, other supports and resources. So I don't even know if I can draw a comparison. And truthfully, this is the population who I choose to continue to work with, because I believe that they are so misunderstood as, if we can group them all. And of course, there are people who experience, who are chronically uninsured, homeless, unemployed. And then there are people for whom that is a transitional state. And I've worked with both, both of those groups.
And so one of the things we're going to get into is helping people build resilience. And you and I were talking the other day about how much we prefer different terms for wellness than self-care. Right. Because the myth, I think, in a lot of people's minds are that costs money, it has to be an hour, it has to be a this or that. But particularly with the population that you're working with, where there's not maybe a lot of disposable income to spend on those things we consider to be wellness activities. So what are some of the things that y'all work on together?
Well, a couple of the models that I like to use in an exploration of wellness with people, and I can send some of this out. There's, models where it will break wellness down into typically 6 or 8 dimensions of wellness, depending on what model you prefer to use. And of course, that model can be flawed in some ways because it kind of neatly divides all these areas where we may have, what does spiritual wellness look like? Financial wellness, physical wellness, emotional wellness, intellectual wellness, social, things like that. So when we break it down in those categories, even if someone has a lack of resources, say in financial wellness, well, they may have an abundance of resources in terms of spiritual wellness. They may have, a lot of social wellness resilience factors that they can rely on and seek for support. And, it may be physical. I mean, we live in a very temperate, beautiful place. So a lot of my clients, like myself, also enjoy being outdoors, moving their body, getting fresh air. It really, and we can also, go back and look at Maslow's hierarchy and, look at how those dimensions of wellness were even being explored in that model. This is something that we've always recognized. And so those are some of the pieces that I use with clients. Also offering, cognitive processing therapy and some somatic interventions, and I'm always looking for new and free and very accessible resources to share with people because, we work with people with varying abilities, variable resources. So it's always just meeting that person where they are, and having realistic expectations for myself and for them.
Right. I like what you said about we can be really depleted in some major areas and then have abundance of resources.
Yes.
There's interns on this meeting who always say, get a quote. So if anybody's listening, I like that as a quote, that you can be depleted in some major life areas, but have abundance of resources in others, and how to build on those. Social work is a background that really emphasizes strength-based and not deficit-based. So I really like that a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And so you're talking about physical movement, getting outside. What are some of the typical things that you tend to help people incorporate for building resilience and wellness besides the ones you've already mentioned?
Well, I would say, especially currently, coming up with creative solutions to for social wellness, and that is something that I've also experienced because and I know I sent you that article from the Post as a result of COVID and the way that it's changing our daily lives. So many of us are experiencing the psychological impacts of social distancing, and that's very real. So even my clients who do not have steady employment, and for most of us, we get a lot of our social needs met through our employment, so there's an overlap there. We get a lot of our intellectual needs met, we get a lot of our financial needs met, so we've probably experienced quite a number of changes in those areas. So I think that social is always, I was talking to someone the other day who has been isolated for quite a number of years as a result of her mental health. And we talked about the importance of social connection, the importance of having people who you care about and feel as though they care about you. And we cannot be mentally well if we do not have reciprocal, supportive, satisfying relationships with others. We can't, Then, for people who maybe don't have a lot of resources, there's intellectual wellness, depending on what that person may be interested in. What new things can we learn? Can we develop a new hobby? That's another thing a lot of us are needing to do, where it's like, well, I've got all this time. What am I going to do? So, okay, like let's talk about it. Is there something new you want to learn? Is there another skill you want to develop? We have some real opportunities right now. And you addressed physical, emotional, of course. We talk about the importance of coming to therapy, taking what you're learning and applying it to your life, exploring other things that support our emotional wellness, because it's certainly not only professional services, it's other things that, again, connect to intellectual and physical and social. And of course, there's environmental wellness as well, for, say, those of us who are, I'll use myself as an example, working from home. I school my children in the morning, and, then I transition to work in a corner of my bedroom for the rest of the afternoon. And my husband's also working from home. So environmental wellness in our home looks like, having a consistent schedule, having reasonable and agreed upon expectations for ourselves and our children, and one another. So yeah, I don't know if I've answered your question, or it's been,
no, you
I told you in our call on Monday, I could go on and on. So you have to stop me.
You're welcome to go on and on. And so then thinking about wellness in ourselves, not only as practitioners or service providers, but as parents and humans, what are some of the things that you have incorporated, or maybe we're already doing a good job? You and I talked about the other day, I'm not the best at self-care or wellness. And so it actually helps me to reinforce it to other people, because I know I have to be modeling it to have the right to talk about it.
Yeah.
And so it consistently challenges me to take better care of myself. But what are some of the things that you find yourself doing to help with your own wellness?
Absolutely. Getting outside, leaving the house. I really enjoy hiking and trail running, and being outside, especially with my kids, or especially with my family. That's very important for me. Intellectual wellness is very important for me. Feeling as though, I'm growing personally, professionally, spiritually. I enjoy that aspect of wellness for myself. So I find that I tend to be a bit heavy in that area, because I'm always looking for pieces to kind of say, okay, so here's what I've got here, Social wellness that's an area where I've experienced radical changes, and I've had to be creative in both coming up with solutions in response to the environmental changes. And, it's having Skype dates with people, and it's to say, I also, I manage the social aspect for myself as well as my children because of their age. So that's something that we're always trying to kind of build upon and expand, and it's ever changing. Spiritual wellness is very important for me. I rely deeply on, I practice Buddhism, and I have for a very long time. So that is something that I rely upon. And again, I spoke about the environmental wellness just within my home, and being proactive in addressing what things need to look like, or, what are some goals we have.
Several different thoughts. When we were talking the other day, so the first time, let's say, I had 5 thoughts at once, so my brain locked up. As I've been talking more and more about self-care and wellness, I have become more and more aware that self-care is just one more thing that I'm supposed to be doing on my long list of things, and I get really tired. And and then Mary McKinney was on one of our first one of these, and she's talking about relational care. and helping each other to take better care of ourselves. And I'm just becoming more and more aware of how critical that is, and how we're starting to have that conversation more and more.
Absolutely.
And it's different from the conversation about taking care of each other. It's not the same thing in my mind. It's more like prompting us to do a better job making our own choices for ourselves. So you and I touched on that the other day, and you said that that's an important part of your wellness is that there's people around you who help you with that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course. And I do. I rely on my husband to give me honest feedback and let me know, when I'm seeming depleted, when I'm seeming short, and encouraging me to take time, for a hike, or, just to kind of get out of the house. I need reminders too, because I'll just go down the rabbit hole and keep doing my thing. And when I do that and I lose that awareness of the big picture, I get tunnel vision, and I just do it and do it and do it. And you're right, it does. And even looking at definitions of wellness, it's not necessarily only just taking action. It's the combination of, developing self and environmental awareness to know what is going on and how you can respond, and then making choices that promote health for yourself. And that interplay is both dynamic and subjective. It's always changing subtly. Now, we've just experienced a rapid change within the past 7 months, or profound change. I kind of see it as it's been a heavy hit, and a lot of us are having to we're rebounding from that heavy hit, as opposed to kind of little day-to-day hits that we have to negotiate. And it's subjective in that it's highly individual, and our individual needs, resources, and barriers change over time. So it's an ever-changing conversation. It's an ever-changing opportunity to apply awareness and just to make choices that will support our overall health.
Yeah, that makes good sense. You mentioned children. Are there things that you do with them that I'm sure that what are the things that you're already doing with them to help them be aware of taking care of themselves and boundaries and wellness and that kind of thing?
Absolutely. So, we read a lot of books that address, social or emotional issues. What I do with my children, it's very different from child to child, not only because they're very different as people, but because I have a 9-year-old and now almost a 6-year-old. So developmentally, they're at different places and they need different things. My 6-year-old requires a bit more support in terms of social. What does her social wellness look like? And there's a lot of navigation around handling anger, tolerating distress, communicating with friends, and my 9-year-old is developing awareness around, what is spiritual wellness and, community social wellness, that she's getting old enough to have some of those conversations. So we look for ways for her to participate in her community, either in person or virtually for the most part. And intellectual wellness, because we're doing all of our schooling remotely, and we have since school began. So not only taking the curriculum that's provided, but then finding ways to supplement where, this isn't required, but this is an interest that we have. It's constantly, environmental. It's every day is like a clean your room kind of thing, and keeping things neat and tidy and learning important lessons of organization and responsibility. And
you're talking a lot about balance, and I like what you were saying about being aware of the different people need different things, and that even though they're both children, they're at different places developmentally. I have 2 children, and their personalities in some ways are identical, in some ways are polar opposite. So the balance of trying to make sure people are getting what they need, which I
Exactly.
think is true for us as service providers as well.
Yeah.
And then you also mentioned home. And so what that reminded me of was my home has always been my sanctuary. Like I just
Yes.
can't wait to get there, put on my snowman pajamas and the cats and my family. And so when this all started, I was like, oh my God, we're all going home. This is
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah.
And then by the end of this summer, I was like, it never stops because it's all here now. So 3 different jobs and
Yes.
online schooling and all that is all in the house. And so
Absolutely.
I really struggled with the schedule and stopping and getting up and
Yeah. Yeah.
putting on clothes. We're all doing the top is for
Right.
Zoom and the bottom is for our Christmas pajamas.
Absolutely.
So all of that. So just trying to find those healthy boundaries and balance and all of those kinds of things. I think we're
Yeah.
struggling with that right
Oh, I'm losing some audio here.
now. Uh-oh.
Has yours changed? Oh, no. Now I hear you.
No, mine hasn't changed. Are you good?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm good. I'm good.
Okay. So
Yeah.
just
Well,
the balance.
Yeah, a balance. Absolutely. And, and having reasonable expectations is so important. And for many of us, when we have to make rapid, dramatic changes, some of us may tend to turn on ourselves, and begin to get down on ourselves or get frustrated with ourselves because we're not able to maintain the same activities that we've used in the past to promote wellness, that we've had to really scale back, or we've had to do something that we don't actually like, but like, let's say I always loved going to spin classes at the gym, that met my social, physical, and emotional wellness, and now I can't do that. Well, I might need to do something and try to just, have find some enjoyment in an activity that can give me some of what I had, but it might not be a reasonable expectation that I will love it as much as spin classes at the gym, and to not get stuck in feeling that frustration, because just like everything else, this will not last forever. It won't. And after this ends, invariably at some point in time, maybe in our lifetimes, maybe not, there will be something else, so, and again, I really fall back on my own spirituality as reminders for that. At some point, even when things are going well, we can't control our environment to a degree. And when we can, inevitably, we all experience sickness, old age, and death. Not to bring it down, but truly, what wellness looks like for someone who's 85 looks very different than someone who's 40, probably, so we have to adjust our expectations. And I see that as resilience, when we can say, okay, this has changed, I need to roll with it and just have the best attitude as possible. That is resilience.
And I've seen that so much. Sorry. I've seen that so much in the school system, where when you talk about rapid and profound shifts.
Oh man, yeah,
having to go from having all these beings with you, where you
Absolutely.
have eyes and hands on them, to having to do everything over the computer, and just how difficult that's been, not just for any one population. I work with kids and teachers and parents who are all really struggling with the lack of connection and the lack of competence. Even last spring, when we were doing the online learning, and I've told this story to a lot of people, and my daughter gave it everything she had. She's 16, and at some point I wrote the teachers and I was like, good luck to you. I wish you the best, but I'm not a teacher, and I cannot stand here and type her fingers on the keys for her. So I'm gonna have to bow out of this. And I hope good things for you. And it was just a terrible struggle. Now, it gave me a great understanding for a lot of the kids and parents that are struggling now, but it's just such a profound shift.
Absolutely.
And even my 16-year-old said, Mom, I realize part of why I do well in school is the connection. The teachers are standing there and we have a relationship, and now I just don't open the laptop, and it's a real easy way not to engage. So I am grateful that it gives me that perspective, but It's been a
Certainly.
very difficult shift, I think, for people, much more stressful across the board.
100%. 100%. I was just talking to my brother a few days ago, and he lives in Louisiana, but he's a pilot, and he flies with major airlines who, you know, their schedules have really not changed very much. And so he kind of lives his life as though COVID has not happened. It really hasn't made some of the dramatic changes it's made to our lives. And in Louisiana, they're doing in-person schooling, and it's, you know, at least in their district. Yeah. So we kind of talked about coping skills. You know, coping skills we're so used to applying in our daily lives. And this has made me aware that I've used distraction quite a bit to cope. You know, things are tanking at home. Hey, I spend most of my time at work, you know, or I can go to the gym, or I can go to a friend's house or a restaurant, or, you know, so it's in a way, even though, you know, COVID has been one of the ways I've wanted to look at it, because I try to see, you know, situations for the most part as a two-sided coin, where I try to explore, what am I getting out of this? How is this serving my personal, professional, spiritual development? Because if I don't, I'll lose my mind, you know, and I'll just get preoccupied with despair and frustration.
Yeah.
So in that way, it has taught me that I might need to develop other coping skills, you know, because right now I can't rely on distraction, you know, and I know that I shared with you when we spoke on Monday, I experienced mental illness, and at times it can be debilitating, especially since, you know, COVID. And I have, through that, I found ways to understand in a deeper and more compassionate way the struggles of the clients who I see now and will see in the future. And I've reflected on work I've done with people in the past, that, you know, I feel as though I have a deeper understanding for where many people who, you know, in all intents and purposes, have been living as though COVID had happened 3 years ago, you know, with isolating, lack of resources, you know, lack of support.
Yeah, that makes sense. I saw a quote the other day that one of the interns had put on Facebook that said, I may not have walked in your shoes, so let me hold the door for you, because even though I don't know what it's like, I know it was hard. Yeah. And that was so profound to me, because I think sometimes we pretend that we can understand what other people have gone through. And so even when we can't, if we can help make the load a little lighter somehow.
Absolutely.
I think that can be powerful and profound as well.
Yeah.
Let's see. So I know this is a huge jump, but you mentioned 85 years old. Are the clients that you see at the community care clinic a wide range of ages? Do you get to work with children as well, or is it adult population?
I don't work with children. It's a strictly adult population. And, you know, I don't know what, say, the oldest clients who we have are. I do work with a number of people in their 60s, but in this environment, I haven't worked with folks 70 plus, you know.
And if somebody wanted to refer someone there who doesn't have insurance and needs either medical or case management types of services, how does somebody go about making that referral? Do they just call the office, or how does that work?
I would encourage that person to call the clinic and talk with the office manager about eligibility, and just find out what they need to do in order to determine their eligibility. And if they meet the requirements of the programs, then they would begin scheduling appointments.
And do you, you talked a lot about individual therapy. Are there any kind of groups there at all, or is it primarily?
Not currently.
Well,
that is something that you know, I mean, that's a fair question.
Maybe, I don't know.
That's a fair question. There are virtual groups, you know, there are virtual groups. We don't have any at present, but it is something that we have, that we've explored and that we want to grow into in the future. I personally love groups. You know, I do. And I know that there's a lot of resistance in group participation, but I've seen people get a lot from one another, you know, and that's, and, you know, and build relationships. And again, like develop that social support and those social connections. So hopefully in the future.
Someone wrote in the chat box that a colleague has used, when we were talking about all the dramatic changes, that a colleague used the phrase, I believe really captures this time. We're all in the same storm, but not in the same boat, which I have not heard and really like a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, you know, and what is the person's awareness of the storm? Because, you know, what's been interesting in this setting is not the, you know, the question, well, does this person believe COVID's a thing or not, has been, how has COVID actually impacted the life of maybe the client who I'm working with? Because for so many people who have, you know, have not had economic resources, have not had social support, have not had all of these things that maybe you and I, you know, have, has COVID really changed their life, you know, in any noticeable way? And there's a number of people who I would answer, you know, no, COVID does not even come up in our sessions.
Wow.
You know, yeah, absolutely. It's either not a concern for them, or, you know, it is, but they've been living under, you know, some of the same social and economic strains that now others are experiencing.
Wow, that's something that I had not brought into my consciousness at all.
Oh
So
yeah, and it's very,
out.
it is very intense. It's very intense, you know, and you know, and I'm glad we're bringing this up, because just like every conversation around wellness, we need to consider both oppression and privilege, you know, and oppression and privilege are going to impact the quality of your boat. So yeah, you're in the same storm, but does your boat have features that protect you from some of the severe consequences that this storm brings? You know, I mean, I think we can, you know, look at recent, you know, recent national news, and we can see differences between medical care of, you know, people in power, people who have quite a bit of privilege and resources, versus what that medical care has looked like for the majority of people worldwide. The consequences have been very different.
Yep, that's an excellent point.
Yeah.
Another thing I was wondering about, you've mentioned working and living in several different places. And I'm wondering if there are some system things that you have noticed that are more prevalent to Boone or Watauga County than maybe some other places you've been.
Yes. In terms, yes. So I left Boone so I'm from Louisiana, and I hadn't practiced professionally in Louisiana. You know, I'd done volunteer work for social service organizations, but my awareness of community networked organizations and resources was not as good as it is now. So I had this concentrated period of about 8 years in Boone, and then we moved back to Louisiana for 23 months and then came back here. And I did work, you know, clinically, professionally in Louisiana. So what I noticed was that the mental health organizational, or the mental health system in Louisiana is, it doesn't look like it does here. There are multiple community mental health organizations. And now I did live in a city, so that changes it as well. You know, there's lots of tiny ones, and for the most part, they will employ folks with high school educations, or you know, bachelor's level degrees. So they don't typically employ people with master's degrees or beyond. Those people tend to go into medical social work, or, you know, clinical or psychiatric social work within hospital settings, of which there were many. Also, something that's more prevalent in Louisiana than it is in Boone is there's a number of psychiatric nurse practitioners who work in concert with or in collaboration with folks in private practice, and they mutually treat clients and kind of collaborate on cases together. And there are not as many collaborations and, you know, community meetings. Folks don't tend to really know one another there very well, you know, unless they've been in the field for a very long time and they've just kind of gotten used to working with the same people. I find that Boone has more of kind of like maybe what Mary was talking about, what I would consider, you know, a real community wellness perspective, you know, where we do have lots of collaboratives and we regularly communicate with the same people. And I think that ultimately that serves our clients, you know, because the familiarity and the ease and the positive relationships we have with other providers can only enhance the services that we provide and the ease with which we provide them.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm going to stop and see if anybody has any questions or comments that they would like to ask Lesley. You're welcome to unmute yourself and just chime in, or you can type it in the chat if you would rather do that. But anything you'd like to hear from her about the community care clinic or just wellness in general, or anything we've talked about so far, or something that I have forgotten to ask that you wanted to know. So we'll give people a second to see if anybody responds to that. I don't see anything coming.
You had mentioned
Okay.
to call the clinic if we wanted to refer somebody.
Yes.
Could you give us that contact information?
I absolutely will. Let me know when you're ready.
Okay.
So the main number is 828-268-9967.
And what's the full name of the place you work?
Community Care Clinic.
Okay. Do you have an address for that too?
I do not.
It's all right. You can send it.
I should have.
I'll send it out. That's okay.
Okay.
You haven't been there, right?
Yes,
Why would you need to know the address?
I mean.
But if you'll send that to me, Lesley, we take attendance and I can send it on to people.
Oh, sure.
And it comes to the WCCI as well. So
okay.
I can send that to her. And so when we're talking about the community care clinic, oh, Marianne, did you want to ask any other questions before I launch into something else?
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay. I'll get you the, oh, look, somebody said maybe 9:35.
Nope. No, I saw that. I saw that. Hold on. I'll let me. Yes.
You're Googling?
Yeah, I am. It's one of my most trusted professional resources.
I know.
Okay, so we're at 141 Health Center Drive, Suite B in Boone.
And you called it the Valley of Hope, and I've never heard that before, but like that a lot.
Yes. Yes.
So what a nice reframe on some of the things that I've heard about that area.
I know.
So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
When talking about the community care clinic, you mentioned medical care, counseling, and I said, without even being sure, case management, is that a service?
We do provide medical case management, and we're working on developing mental health case management as well.
And then somebody just asked if the clinic provides services for Spanish-speaking clients.
We do. We do. We would have translation services available that would be coordinated, but absolutely.
And are there other services then besides medical case management, counseling, and medical care? Anything else we're forgetting to mention?
No, not really. I would say that we regularly have conversations with other or with folks about other community resources. So in that way, there is, and I guess that could fall within a case management piece of letting people know what other supports are available in the area.
Okay, sounds good. Is there anything that I haven't thought to ask you about that you would like to mention before we get done, or something that's come to you that we haven't talked about yet?
No, I'm looking at my notes and I feel like we kind of touched on everything that you and I had discussed.
Well, we appreciate you spending time with us today. I'm going to give
Absolutely.
everybody just one more chance to jump in or mention a question if they'd like, and if not, we'll let people get on with their days. But I know I personally was really happy to get some more information about the community care clinic, because it's one of those more nebulous. I just don't have a lot of, probably partially because I work so much with kids, I'm guessing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yes.
I just don't have quite as much interaction, but
Exactly.
I don't know if you can see the chats, but there's comments about thank you and thank you for your work there. And so if anybody has any questions from this and wants Lesley's contact information, you're welcome to email me and I'll be happy to share that with you. And Lesley, we really enjoyed having you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure.
Well, I enjoyed it as well. I hope you have a good rest of the day, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.
You too. You guys take care.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.